They called me just a housewife, until I walked into that courtroom and tore their world apart. My name is Evelyn Mercer. I'm 68 years old, and 3 months ago my husband died in my arms. Before his body was even cold, his son accused me of stealing everything. They wanted to destroy me, humiliate me, take what little dignity I had left, and grind it into the marble floors of that courthouse. They didn't know who I really was. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. I never wanted to be in that courtroom. The morning it all started, I was sitting in Victor's study, our study, going through condolence cards people had sent after the funeral. Most of them were polite lies. He was a great man. He'll be missed. Half the people who signed those cards hadn't spoken to Victor in years. But you send the cards anyway. That's what people do. The doorbell rang at 9:15. I wasn't expecting anyone. Our housekeeper Maria had taken the week off. I'd insisted. She'd worked herself sick taking care of Victor during those final months, and I needed the silence anyway. So I answered the door myself, still in my robe, my hair barely brushed. A man in an expensive suit stood on the porch. Behind him, a younger woman held a leather folder. "Mrs. Mercer?" he said. "Yes?" He handed me an envelope. "You've been served." I stood there staring at the thing in my hand like it was a snake. Served with what? Contestation of estate. You're being sued by Damien Hale for fraudulent acquisition of assets and undue influence over the deceased. The woman behind him, his assistant, I assumed, wouldn't even look at me. She stared at her shoes like I was something disgusting. "Damien is suing me?" "Court date's in 3 weeks. I'd recommend you get a lawyer, ma'am." Then they left. I stood in the doorway, the wind pulling at my robe, holding a legal document that accused me of manipulating my husband, of stealing his fortune, of being a liar and a thief. Victor had been dead for 12 days. I didn't cry right away. I walked back into the house, closed the door, and sat down at the kitchen table. I read the entire document, start to finish. It was 23 pages long. Every sentence was a knife. The defendant, Evelyn Mercer, systematically isolated Victor Hale from his family. The defendant exploited Mr. Hale's declining mental state. The defendant manipulated the deceased into altering his will under coercive and fraudulent circumstances. I'd been married to Victor for 31 years. 31 years of waking up next to him, of making him laugh when he was stressed, of holding his hand through every surgery, every scare, every late-night panic about the business. I gave up everything for that man. My career, my identity, my entire life. And now his son was telling the world I'd done it all for money. That's when I cried. I sat at that table and sobbed until my ribs hurt, until I couldn't breathe, until there was nothing left inside me but anger. I didn't know what to do. I called Victor's estate lawyer, Gerald Whitmore. He'd handled the will. Surely he could help. "Evelyn," he said when he picked up, his voice cautious, "I heard about the lawsuit. Gerald, this is insane. You know Victor wanted me to have everything. You were there when he signed the documents." "I was." "So what do I do?" There was a long pause. "Evelyn, I can't represent you. It would be a conflict of interest. I represented Victor's estate, not you personally." "Then who do I call?" Another pause. "I can give you some names, but Evelyn, you need to understand something. Damien hired Marcus Killian." I didn't know that name. "Who?" "The best litigator in the state, maybe the country. He doesn't lose, Evelyn, and he doesn't take cases unless he thinks he can win." My stomach dropped. Why would Damien hire someone like that? "Because he thinks he can win," Gerald said quietly. "And between you and me, a lot of people are going to believe him. You're the younger wife. You don't have kids. Victor left you everything and cut Damien out almost entirely. On paper, it looks suspicious." "Victor made that decision himself." "I know, but you're going to have to prove it. And Damien's going to do everything he can to make you look like a gold digger who tricked a dying old man." I felt sick. "Gerald, I don't even know how to fight this." "Then find someone who does and do it fast." He hung up. Knock out. I spent the next 2 days calling lawyers. Most of them wouldn't take the case. A few were polite about it. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mercer, but I'm not taking new clients right now." Others were blunt. One man actually laughed. "You're going up against Marcus Killian with no evidence and a bad set of optics? Lady, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole." The ones who did agree to meet with me all said the same thing. This was going to be ugly, expensive, and I'd probably lose. "You have to understand," one of them told me, sitting across from me in his glass-walled office. "Juries don't like situations like this. Older man, younger woman, lots of money. Even if you're innocent, the story writes itself. And Killian's going to write it." "I'm not that much younger," I said. Victor was 76. I'm 68. He shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You're still the second wife. That's enough." "So what do I do?" "Settle. Give Damien part of the estate, maybe half. It's not worth the risk." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Victor didn't want Damien to have half. Victor's dead. I left that office and didn't call him back. Tom. The worst part wasn't the legal fight. It was the whispers. Within a week, the lawsuit was public. Someone, probably Damien's team, had leaked it to the press. The story hit the local news first, then the tabloids, then the internet. Billionaire's widow accused of elder abuse. Gold digger or grieving wife? The Victor Hale estate battle. Son claimed stepmother stole fortune. I stopped leaving the house. Every time I went to the grocery store, people stared. I could feel their judgment like heat on my skin. Once, in the produce section, a woman I'd known from the country club walked right past me without saying hello. She looked me in the eye and then turned away. I put my groceries back and went home. Maria came back to work and found me sitting in the dark. "Mrs. Mercer?" "I'm fine, Maria." "You don't look fine." I wasn't. I'd barely eaten in days. I wasn't sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victor's face the day he changed the will. We'd been sitting in the same study. It was raining. Victor had just come back from the doctor. Another round of tests, more bad news. The cancer was spreading faster than they'd expected. He'd looked so tired. "Evelyn," he'd said, "I need to talk to you about something." "What is it?" "The will." I'd gone cold. "Victor, don't. I'm changing it. I'm leaving everything to you." "You can't do that. Damien's your son." "Damien is a parasite." Victor's voice was flat, emotionless. "He hasn't worked a real day in his life. Every time I've given him money, he's blown it on bad investments or expensive toys. I'm not leaving him my legacy so he can destroy it in 5 years. Victor, I mean it, Evelyn. You're the only person I trust. You've taken care of me. You've been here when no one else was. If something happens to me, I want you to be okay. I want you to have security. I don't want Damien or anyone else taking that from you." I'd held his hand. "He's going to hate me for this." "He already hates you," Victor had said. "He's hated you since the day we got married. At least this way he won't get the satisfaction of pretending he didn't." And now Victor was gone, and Damien was making good on that hate. The court date arrived faster than I expected. I still didn't have a lawyer. I couldn't afford the ones who were willing to take the case. Not without draining the estate, which felt like admitting guilt. And the ones who worked cheap weren't good enough to go up against Marcus Killian. So I went alone. The courthouse was enormous, all marble and glass and echoing footsteps. I felt small walking through those doors. Invisible. I wore a black dress and a string of pearls Victor had given me for our 20th anniversary. My hands shook as I carried my bag. A leather folder filled with documents I'd printed myself, letters and medical records and things I thought might help. I had no idea what I was doing. Damien was already there. He sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, Marcus Killian, and 2 assistants. Killian was exactly what I'd imagined. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. He looked like the kind of man who could sell you your own house and make you thank him for it. Damien wouldn't look at me. He was 43 years old, my stepson, and I'd known him since he was 12. I'd tried so hard with him when Victor and I first got married. I'd cooked his favorite meals. I'd asked about school. I'd gone to his basketball games, even though he never acknowledged me in the stands. He'd hated me from the start. "All rise." The judge entered. An older man, gray beard, sharp eyes. I didn't recognize him. "This is a hearing to contest the last will and testament of Victor Hale, deceased," the judge said. Mr. Killian, you may present your opening statement. Killian stood. He buttoned his jacket, walked to the center of the room, and smiled at the judge like they were old friends. Your Honor, this case is about exploitation. It's about a vulnerable man in the final months of his life, isolated from his family, manipulated by a woman who saw an opportunity and took it. I felt my face flush. Victor Hale was a brilliant entrepreneur, Killian continued. He built an empire. But in his final years, he was sick. Weak. And Evelyn Mercer used that weakness. She convinced him to cut his only son out of the will. She made him dependent on her. She controlled his access to friends, to family, to his own memories. And when he died, she walked away with everything. He turned and pointed at me. That woman is not a grieving widow. She's a thief. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Mercer, do you have representation? No, Your Honor. His eyebrows lifted. You're representing yourself? I didn't have a choice. Killian smiled. Buck eats. The hearing was a nightmare. Killian called witness after witness. People I'd never met, people who barely knew Victor, all of them with the same story. Evelyn isolated him. Evelyn controlled him. Evelyn changed him. One woman, a former business associate, claimed I'd refused to let Victor attend meetings in his final months. He wanted to be there, she said, but Evelyn said he was too sick. She made all the decisions. That was a lie. Victor couldn't walk in his final months. He could barely get out of bed. I hadn't kept him from meetings. The cancer had. But I didn't have a lawyer to cross-examine her, so the lie just sat there. Another witness, a neighbor, said I'd been cold at the funeral. She didn't cry, he said. Not once. It was strange. I'd cried for weeks, just not in public, not in front of people like him. Damien took the stand last. He looked calm, composed, like he'd practiced this. My father loved me, he said. We had our differences, but he was my dad. And then Evelyn came into his life, and everything changed. She turned him against me. She told him I was irresponsible. She made him think I didn't care. And when he got sick, she wouldn't even let me visit without her permission. That's not true, I said. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Mercer, you'll have a chance to speak. But I wouldn't. Not really. Because I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to fight back. Killian leaned forward. Damien, do you believe your father was of sound mind when he changed his will? No, Damien said. I think he was scared, and I think Evelyn took advantage of that fear. Thank you, Killian said. No further questions. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Mercer, do you wish to cross-examine? I stood. My legs felt weak. Damien, when was the last time you visited your father before he got sick? Damien blinked. When was the last time you called him? Sent him a card? Took him to dinner? We were busy. You borrowed $50,000 from him 2 years ago, I said, for a business venture. What happened to that business? Damien's face reddened. That's not relevant. It failed, didn't it? And you never paid him back. Your Honor. Killian stood. Mrs. Mercer, the judge said, do you have evidence of this loan? I fumbled through my folder. I have bank statements and emails. I handed them to the bailiff. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped them. The judge looked at the documents, then at Damien. Mr. Hale, did you borrow money from your father? Damien hesitated. Yes, but that doesn't mean... It means you had a financial interest in his estate, I said. My voice was louder now, stronger. You weren't worried about him. You were worried about your inheritance. The courtroom murmured. Killian stood again. Your Honor, Mrs. Mercer is clearly not qualified to represent herself. This line of questioning is inappropriate. Actually, the judge said, I think it's quite appropriate. Continue, Mrs. Mercer. I took a breath. Damien, how many times did you visit your father in the hospital during his final month? I don't remember exactly. Twice, I said. You visited twice. I was there every single day. So don't stand there and tell this court that I kept you away. You didn't want to be there. Damien's jaw tightened. You don't know what it was like. I know exactly what it was like. I watched him die. Where were you? Silence. No further questions, I said. I sat down, my heart hammering. I'd landed a hit. I'd actually landed a hit, but Killian wasn't done. He stood, straightened his tie, and called his final witness, Dr. Raymond Marks, Victor's physician. The man walked to the stand, sworn in, and sat down with his hands folded. Dr. Marks, Killian said, you treated Victor Hale in the final year of his life, is that correct? Yes. Can you describe his mental state during that time? Dr. Marks hesitated. Victor was declining. The cancer had spread to his brain. He experienced confusion, memory loss, and mood swings. My stomach dropped. In your professional opinion, Killian said, was Victor Hale capable of making sound decisions regarding his estate in the final months of his life? I don't think I can answer that definitively. But you have concerns? Yes. Thank you, doctor. Killian sat down, looking satisfied. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Mercer? I stood. My mouth was dry. Dr. Marks, did you ever recommend that Victor be declared mentally incompetent? No. Did you ever suggest that he shouldn't be allowed to make legal decisions? No, but did he ever forget who I was? Dr. Marks paused. No. Did he ever express confusion about his will or his wishes? Not to me. So, despite his illness, he still knew what he wanted. Mrs. Mercer, it's not that simple. It is, I said. Either he was mentally competent or he wasn't. Which is it? Dr. Marks looked uncomfortable. He was capable, but vulnerable. Vulnerable isn't the same as incompetent. The judge wrote something down. I sat down, shaking. The hearing ended at 4 in the afternoon. The judge didn't issue a ruling. He said he needed time to review the evidence. We'd reconvene in 2 weeks. I walked out of that courthouse alone. Damien and his legal team swept past me without a word. Reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat there for 20 minutes staring at nothing. I'd survived, barely, but I hadn't won. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the hearing in my head. Every moment I'd stumbled, every question I should have asked, every lie I'd let slide because I didn't know how to fight it. At 2 in the morning, I gave up and went downstairs. Victor's study was dark. I turned on the desk lamp and sat in his chair. It still smelled like him, cologne and old leather. I started going through his files. I didn't know what I was looking for. Proof, maybe. Something that would show the court who Victor really was. Who I really was. I found his journals first. Victor had kept notebooks for years, though leather-bound things he'd scribbled in late at night. I'd never read them. It felt like an invasion. But now, sitting in the dark, I opened the most recent one. The entries were short, fragmented. Evelyn made soup today. I couldn't eat much, but I tried. She sat with me anyway. Damien called, asked for money again. I said no. He hung up. Evelyn read to me tonight. I don't remember the book, but I remember her voice. That's enough. I started crying again. Then I found the envelope. It was tucked into the back of the journal, sealed, with my name on it. For Evelyn. To be opened if needed. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a letter. And a USB drive. The letter was in Victor's handwriting, shaky but legible. Evelyn, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I know my son, he's making your life hell. I'm sorry. I should have been harder on him when he was young. I should have taught him the value of work, of respect, of loyalty. Instead, I gave him everything, and he learned nothing. He's going to come after you. He's going to say I wasn't in my right mind. He's going to call you a liar and a thief. And people will believe him because it's easier than believing the truth. The truth is this. You saved me. I was a miserable old man when we met. I'd built an empire and had no one to share it with. My first wife was gone. My son hated me. I was rich and empty. And then you walked into my life. You didn't want my money, Evelyn. You wanted me. You laughed at my jokes. You argued with me when I was being stubborn. You made me feel like a person again, not just a name on a company letterhead. You gave up your career for me. I know that. You were Judge Eleanor Mercer, one of the best legal minds in the state. And you walked away from it all to be my wife. You never asked for anything in return. So I'm giving you everything, not because you manipulated me, but because you earned it. The USB drive contains video recordings I made over the past 6 months. My lawyer, Gerald, has copies. I wanted to make sure there was no doubt, no question about my intentions. If Damien challenges the will, show them this. And Evelyn, don't let them break you. You're stronger than you think. Victor. I sat there holding the letter, sobbing. Then I plugged the USB drive into Victor's computer. The screen lit up. There were 12 video files. I clicked the first one. Victor's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but lucid, clear. My name is Victor Hale, he said. Today is March 14th. I am 76 years old and I am of sound mind. I'm making this recording because I know my son Damien will contest my will, and I want there to be no doubt about my intentions. He paused. I am leaving my entire estate to my wife, Evelyn Mercer. Not because she asked for it, not because she manipulated me, but because she is the only person who has truly cared for me in my final years. Damien has repeatedly borrowed money from me without repaying it. He has shown no interest in my life or my well-being. He calls only when he needs something, and I'm done enabling him. Victor looked directly at the camera. Evelyn, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm leaving you to fight this battle alone, but I know you can win. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Don't let them take that from you. The video ended. I sat in the dark, staring at the screen, and for the first time since Victor died, I felt something other than grief. I felt angry, bug. They wanted to destroy me. They wanted to paint me as a helpless, stupid woman who tricked a dying man. But I wasn't helpless, and I wasn't stupid. I opened the second drawer of Victor's desk. At the bottom, buried under old contracts and tax forms, I found it. My law degree. Judge Eleanor Mercer. Harvard Law, class of 1982. I'd presided over cases for 20 years. I'd written rulings that shaped state law. I'd sent criminals to prison and freed the innocent. I'd been feared in that courthouse. And then I'd walked away. Because I loved Victor. Because I thought being his wife was more important than being a judge. I'd buried Eleanor Mercer. But she wasn't dead. I picked up the phone and called Gerald Whitmore. He answered on the third ring, groggy. Evelyn, it's 2 a.m. I need you to file a motion, I said. I'm entering new evidence, and I'm representing myself. Evelyn, that's not a good... I'm not asking for your opinion, Gerald. I'm telling you what to do. File the motion. I'll handle the rest. I hung up. Then I turned on every light in the study, pulled out Victor's files, and started working. I had 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to become Eleanor Mercer again. I wasn't going to waste a single second. The first thing I did was pull every case file I could remember. Not Victor's files. Mine. I'd boxed them up when I retired. 20 years of rulings, briefs, legal precedents I'd written or cited. I'd shoved them into the back of the garage and told myself I'd never need them again. That part of my life was over. I was wrong. At 3 a.m, I dragged those boxes into the study and started sorting. My back ached. My hands were covered in dust. But I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Not the grieving widow everyone pitied, not the gold digger they wanted me to be. Judge Eleanor Mercer, the woman who'd made grown men stammer on the witness stand. She was still here, buried under 30 years of casseroles and PTA meetings and quiet sacrifice, but still here. I found what I was looking for around 4:30, a case I'd presided over in 1998, a state dispute. A son claimed his mother had been coerced into changing her will by her second husband. The son lost. Badly. Because I'd seen through his performance, his crocodile tears, his selective memory about how often he'd actually visited her. I'd written a scathing opinion, 23 pages dismantling every argument his lawyer made. I read it twice, taking notes. Then I started drafting my own response to Damien's lawsuit. The sun came up. I kept writing. Maria arrived at 7 and found me still at the desk, surrounded by paper, my reading glasses sliding down my nose. Mrs. Mercer, have you been up all night? I need coffee, Maria, strong. She didn't argue. She knew that tone. By noon, I had a draft, 52 pages. Every accusation Damien had made answered with evidence, legal precedent, and cold fury. I called Gerald. "It's ready," I said. "Evelyn, I really think you should reconsider representing yourself. Killian's going to eat you alive." "Let him try." I emailed him the document. Then I took a shower, put on a suit I hadn't worn in 15 years, and drove to the courthouse to file it myself. The clerk's eyes widened when she saw the page count. "Ma'am, you know you can just have your attorney file this electronically." "I don't have an attorney, and I want it filed today." She looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. But the document was filed, and I walked out of that building feeling 10 feet tall. The war wasn't over, but I'd just fired the first real shot. When I got home, there were 6 missed calls from Damien's lawyer. I didn't call back. Let him sweat. The next morning, my response hit the court docket, and apparently someone in Killian's office actually read it because he called me directly. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, his voice tight. "This is Marcus Killian. I know who you are. We need to talk." "I don't think we do." "Mrs. Mercer, I'm trying to be reasonable here. You filed a 52-page response full of legal arguments that are going to cost both of us time and money to litigate. Let's settle this now. My client is willing to accept 40% of the estate. You keep the house, the investments, and the business. Damien gets liquid assets. Everyone walks away." "No." "Excuse me?" "Your client gets nothing. That's what my husband wanted. That's what the will says. And that's what I'm going to make sure happens." There was a pause. "Mrs. Mercer, do you understand what you're up against? I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't lose." "Neither did I." "I'm sorry?" I smiled. "You should have done your homework, Mr. Killian. Check the name on that filing again. Not Evelyn Mercer. Eleanor." I hung up. 3 hours later, Gerald called me back. "Evelyn, what the hell did you do?" I filed a response. "You saw it." "No, I mean, what did you say to Killian? He just requested an emergency motion to delay the hearing." "Why?" "He says he needs time to," and I'm quoting here, "adequately prepare for an opponent of Mrs. Mercer's caliber." I laughed, actually laughed. "He's stalling." "He's scared," Gerald said. "Evelyn, did you tell him you used to be a judge?" I may have implied it. "He looked you up. He called me an hour ago asking why I didn't mention you'd presided over half the estate cases in this state for 2 decades. "Did you tell him?" "I told him it wasn't relevant, but Evelyn, listen to me. You just painted a target on your back. Killian doesn't like losing, and he really doesn't like being surprised. He's going to come at you twice as hard now." "Good," I said. "I'm ready." But I wasn't. Not really. Because that night, the press found out who I used to be. I don't know who leaked it. Maybe Killian's office, trying to spin the narrative. Maybe someone at the courthouse who remembered my name. Either way, by morning, it was everywhere. Grieving widow revealed as retired Judge Eleanor Mercer. High-profile attorney faces off against former jurist in estate battle. From bench to courtroom, the Hale inheritance war takes a shocking turn. My phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside the house. I closed the curtains and unplugged the landline. Maria brought me lunch on a tray. "Mrs. Mercer, there are people on the lawn." "I know." "What do you want me to tell them?" "Nothing. Let them stand there." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" I looked at her. Maria had been with us for 12 years. She'd seen me at my lowest, crying in the bathroom after Victor's diagnosis, barely able to get out of bed some mornings. She'd never judged me, never gossiped, just quietly kept the house running while I fell apart. "I'm going to win this, Maria." "I know you are. And when I do, Damien's going to wish he'd kept his mouth shut." She smiled. "Good." The hearing was rescheduled for a week later. That gave me 7 days to prepare. I spent the first 2 rewatching Victor's videos. There were 12 recordings total, each one made on a different day over the last 6 months of his life. In some, he looked strong. In others, you could see the disease eating him alive. But in every single one, his mind was sharp, clear, angry. In the 3rd video, he talked about Damien's childhood. "I gave that boy everything," Victor said, his voice rough. "Private schools, cars. a trust fund he burned through by the time he was 25. I kept bailing him out, kept telling myself he'd grow up eventually. He never did. In the 5th video, he talked about me. Evelyn was a judge when I met her. Did you know that? One of the best. She could have been on the state Supreme Court if she'd wanted it, but she gave it up, for me, because I asked her to. His voice cracked. I was selfish. I wanted her home. I wanted someone who understood me, who didn't just see dollar signs, and she said yes. She walked away from everything she'd built, and I spent the next 30 years trying to be worth that sacrifice. I had to pause the video. I couldn't see through the tears. In the 9th video, recorded just 3 weeks before he died, Victor looked directly at the camera. If you're watching this, Damien, it means you're trying to take from her. You're trying to punish her for being what you never were, loyal. You think I owe you something because you're my son, but I don't. I gave you every chance. You wasted all of them. He leaned closer. Evelyn earned this, every penny, and if you take it from her, you're proving exactly why I didn't leave it to you in the first place. The video ended. I saved all 12 files to 3 separate drives, backed them up to the cloud, printed transcripts. I wasn't taking any chances. Then I started preparing my cross-examinations. Killian would call witnesses. I knew that. He'd parade people in front of the judge and try to make me look like a manipulative villain. So I made a list of everyone who might testify and started digging into their histories. Damien's business partner, Eric Langford, the man who'd helped him blow through that $50,000 loan. I found bankruptcy filings, lawsuits, a restraining order from an ex-wife, the neighbor who'd said I didn't cry at the funeral. I found his HOA complaint history. 14 complaints in 3 years, most of them about Victor's cars being parked on the street. He hadn't liked us. The business associate who claimed I'd kept Victor from meetings. I pulled email records from Victor's account, with Gerald's reluctant help, and found proof she'd been fired 6 months before Victor got sick, for embezzlement. By day 5, I had files on everyone, and I was ready to burn their credibility to the ground. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. The doorbell rang at 8 in the evening. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maria had gone home. I thought about ignoring it. Then I heard Damien's voice through the door. Evelyn? I know you're in there. I froze. Evelyn, please, I just want to talk. I opened the door. Not all the way, just enough to see him standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. What do you want, Damien? Can I come in? No. He flinched. I wanted to say I'm sorry for all of this. I stared at him. You're sorry? Yeah, I am. This got out of hand. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You sued me for fraud. You called me a thief. You dragged your father's name through the mud. And now you're sorry. I was angry, he said. I felt like he chose you over me. And I handled it wrong. You handled it exactly how you always handle things, Damien. You threw a tantrum. His jaw tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? You've been throwing tantrums your whole life, and your father always bailed you out. But he's not here anymore. So now you're stuck dealing with the consequences. Evelyn, go home, Damien. I'm trying to make this right. Then drop the lawsuit. He hesitated. I can't. Killian says we have a strong case. Killian's lying to you. He's billing you by the hour, and you're too stupid to realize it. Don't call me stupid. Then stop acting like it. We stood there staring at each other. I could see the boy he used to be underneath all the bitterness. 12 years old, angry at the world because his mother had died and his father had moved on. I'd tried so hard to reach that boy, to show him I wasn't trying to replace his mother, that I just wanted to be his friend. He'd never let me. You know what your father told me once? I said. He said the worst thing he ever did was teach you that you didn't have to work for anything, that money would always fix your mistakes. He regretted that. He said that? He said a lot of things. And if you'd visited more, you might have heard them. Damien's face crumpled. For a second I thought he was going to cry. Then he turned and walked away. I closed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking. The hearing was in 2 days. I spent the next 48 hours rehearsing. I stood in front of the mirror in Victor's study and practiced my opening statement over and over, until the words felt natural, until I could say them without my voice breaking. I practiced my cross-examinations, imagining Killian's objections, the judge's questions. I laid out my clothes, a charcoal suit, white blouse, minimal jewelry, professional, serious, not the weeping widow they expected. I barely slept. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 5. I made coffee, reviewed my notes one last time, and drove to the courthouse in silence. The building was already surrounded by reporters, cameras, microphones. I pushed through them without stopping. "Mrs. Mercer, do you think you'll win?" "Mrs. Mercer, is it true you hid your legal background from your stepson?" "Mrs. Mercer, do you have any comment on the allegations?" I kept walking. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Spectators filled every seat. I recognized some faces, people from the country club, old colleagues from my judge days, reporters. Damien was already seated at the plaintiff's table. He wouldn't look at me. Killian stood when I entered. He buttoned his jacket, that same smug smile on his face. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, "ready to begin?" "I've been ready." The judge entered, same man as before. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, "I've read your response. Quite thorough." "Thank you, Your Honor." "Mr. Killian, call your first witness." Killian stood. "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Dr. Raymond Marks." The doctor took the stand again. Same folded hands, same uncomfortable expression. Killian went through the same questions as last time. Victor's mental state, his confusion, his vulnerability. Then it was my turn. I stood, picked up a folder, and walked to the witness stand. "Dr. Marks," I said, "you testified that my husband experienced confusion and memory loss in his final months." "Yes." "Did he ever forget major life events, his career, his son's name?" "No." "Did he ever fail to recognize people he'd known for years?" "No." "Did he require a conservatorship or legal guardian?" "No." So his confusion was situational, not pervasive. Dr. Marks shifted. "That's a simplification." "Is it?" I opened the folder. "I have your medical notes here from March through July. In every single appointment, you noted that Mr. Hale was alert and oriented. Is that correct?" "Yes, and you never once recommended that he be evaluated for mental incompetence." "No." "Because he wasn't incompetent." "Mrs. Mercer, it's more complicated than—" "Doctor, I'm not asking for a dissertation. I'm asking a yes or no question. Was my husband mentally competent?" Dr. Marks looked at Killian, then at me. "Yes." "Thank you. No further questions." I sat down. Killian looked furious. The judge made a note. Next, Killian called the business associate, the woman who claimed I'd kept Victor from meetings. She walked to the stand, all polished confidence and fake sympathy. "Ms. Patterson," Killian said, "can you describe your professional relationship with Victor Hale?" "I worked with Victor for over a decade," she said. "We were close. He trusted me." "And did that relationship change when he married the defendant?" "Yes. Evelyn became very controlling. She screened his calls. She told him he was too sick to work. She isolated him." Killian nodded. "Thank you, Miss Patterson." He sat down. I stood up. "Ms. Patterson," I said, "when were you fired from Hale Industries?" Her face went pale. "I wasn't fired." "Really?" "Because I have an email here from Victor, dated November of last year, terminating your contract. Would you like me to read it aloud?" That's not... It says, and I quote, "Your employment is terminated effective immediately due to financial discrepancies and breach of trust. Does that refresh your memory?" She didn't answer. "You were caught embezzling, weren't you?" "Your Honor." Killian stood. "Miss Patterson," the judge said. She looked down. "There was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding that involved $75,000 of company funds," I said. "Victor fired you 6 months before he got sick, so your testimony about his final months is fabricated. You weren't even in contact with him." "I was trying to protect his legacy." "By lying under oath?" Killian was on his feet. "Objection. Sustained," the judge said. "Mrs. Mercer, move on." But the damage was done. The courtroom was buzzing. Patterson looked like she wanted to disappear. "No further questions," I said. She practically ran off the stand. The judge called a recess. I stepped out into the hallway, my heart pounding. I'd just destroyed 2 witnesses in under 20 minutes, but Killian wasn't done. He had one more card to play, and I didn't see it coming. When we reconvened, Killian stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Damien Hale to the stand." Damien walked to the front. He looked nervous. His hand shook as he was sworn in. Killian smiled at him. "Damien, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the court about your relationship with your father." Damien took a breath. "My dad and I were close when I was a kid. He was my hero. But after my mom died, everything changed. He remarried, and Evelyn, she made it clear I wasn't part of their life." "Can you give an example?" "She'd cancel family dinners. She'd tell me Dad was too tired to see me. She'd intercept my calls. And when he got sick, she wouldn't even let me visit without calling ahead." "How did that make you feel?" "Like I'd lost him twice. Once to cancer, and once to her." There were murmurs in the courtroom. I saw people nodding, sympathizing. Killian looked satisfied. "No further questions." The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer?" I stood, slowly. I walked to the witness stand and looked at Damien. "Damien," I said, "you testified that I kept you from your father." "You did." "How many times did you visit him in the hospital during his final month?" Damien hesitated. "I already told you, twice." "And how many times did I call you to update you on his condition?" I pulled out my phone records. 17 times. I called you 17 times in July alone. You answered 4 of them. Damien's face flushed. "You didn't come to the hospital because I kept you away. You didn't come because you didn't want to. Isn't that true?" "That's not fair. You borrowed $50,000 from your father. You never paid it back. You started 3 businesses with his money. They all failed. And when he told you he wouldn't give you more, you stopped visiting, didn't you?" "He was the one who pushed me away. Because you only showed up when you needed money." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. "Order!" I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have evidence that Damien Hale borrowed over $300,000 from his father over the past 10 years. None of it repaid. I have emails showing that Victor begged him to visit, to call, to just show up for once without asking for money. And I have proof that Damien sent exactly 1 text message in the week before his father died. It said, 'Can't make it today, busy.'" I looked at Damien. "You didn't lose your father to me. You lost him because you never showed up." Damien was crying now, ugly, gasping sobs. I felt a flicker of something, not sympathy, but not satisfaction either, just sadness. "No further questions," I said quietly. I sat down. The courtroom was silent. The judge cleared his throat. "We'll adjourn for today, closing arguments tomorrow morning." I gathered my papers and walked out. I didn't look back. That night, I couldn't eat. Maria had left dinner on the table. Roasted chicken, vegetables, things I used to love. I sat there staring at the plate until it got cold. My stomach was twisted in knots. Not from fear, from something else. Something that felt like guilt, but sharper. I kept seeing Damien's face when he broke down on the stand. I destroyed him. In front of everyone. His lawyer, the judge, the reporters, the spectators who'd eat up every word and plaster it across the internet by morning. I'd taken every mistake he'd ever made and shoved it in his face until he cracked. And I'd felt nothing. No. That's a lie. I'd felt satisfied, vindicated, powerful. But now, sitting alone in the dark, I felt sick. He was still Victor's son. Still the 12-year-old boy I'd met at that first awkward dinner, the one who wouldn't look at me, who pushed his food around his plate and asked to be excused early. The boy who'd lost his mother and didn't know how to deal with the woman trying to take her place. I'd never been cruel to him, but I'd never really fought for him either. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe Damien had never grown up because no one made him, including me. I pushed the plate away and went back to the study. The USB drive with Victor's videos was still plugged into the computer. I stared at it for a long time before I clicked on the last file, the one I hadn't watched yet. Victor's face filled the screen. This one was different, recorded just days before he died. He looked terrible, gaunt, gray. His voice was barely a whisper. "Evelyn," he said, "if you're watching this, I'm probably gone, and I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago." He coughed. It took him a moment to recover. "I was a bad father." My throat tightened. I gave Damien everything except what he actually needed. Discipline, boundaries, a reason to stand on his own 2 feet. I thought money would fix it. I thought if I just kept helping him, he'd figure it out eventually. But all I did was teach him that failure didn't matter, that Daddy would always write another check. Victor's eyes were wet. And then you came into my life, and I saw what real strength looked like. You didn't need me to save you. You didn't need my money. You chose me anyway. And I was so grateful for that, Evelyn. So grateful that I asked you to give up everything, your career, your independence. I made you smaller so I could feel bigger, and I'm sorry for that. He leaned closer to the camera. Damien's going to hate you. He's going to fight you. And part of me hopes, I hope you don't hate him back. He's broken. But he's still my son. And maybe, if you're strong enough, you can be what I never was. You can make him face the truth without destroying him. Victor wiped his eyes. I love you, Evelyn. I'm sorry I'm leaving you with this mess, but I know you'll handle it better than I ever could. The video ended. I sat there in the dark, crying. Not for Victor, not for myself. For Damien, because I'd just done exactly what Victor asked me not to do. I'd destroyed him. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a decision to make. Closing arguments were in 2 hours. I had everything I needed to win. Victor's videos, the financial records, the testimony I'd already shredded. The judge clearly believed me. Damien's case was falling apart. All I had to do was walk in there, present the evidence, and watch the gavel come down in my favor. But something Victor said kept rattling around in my head. Maybe you can be what I never was. I got dressed slowly, the same charcoal suit, but this time I left the jewelry off. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She was harder than I remembered, colder. I didn't like her. Maria knocked on the bedroom door. Mrs. Mercer, you need to leave soon. I know. Are you okay? I turned. Maria, do you think I'm doing the right thing? She frowned. What do you mean? Going after Damien like this, destroying him in court. Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mrs. Mercer, that boy tried to take everything from you. He called you a liar, a thief. He dragged Mr. Hale's name through the mud. Why are you worried about him? Because he's hurting. So were you. I know, but I don't want to become the kind of person who kicks someone when they're already down. Maria stepped closer. You're not that person. You're defending yourself. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? She touched my arm. You do what you think is right, but don't let guilt make you weak. That boy made his choices. You don't owe him forgiveness just because you feel sorry for him. She was right. I knew she was right, but I still felt sick. I grabbed my files and headed for the courthouse. The reporters were worse this time, cameras everywhere, shouted questions, microphones shoved in my face. Mrs. Mercer, do you regret exposing your stepson's financial history? Mrs. Mercer, is it true you're planning to countersue? Mrs. Mercer, what do you say to people who think you were too harsh? I kept walking. Inside, the courtroom was packed again. Every seat filled. I saw faces I recognized from Victor's business world. People who used to invite us to dinner parties and charity galas. People who'd smiled at me then and whispered about me now. Damien was already seated. He looked like he hadn't slept. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red. Killian sat beside him, stone-faced. He didn't look at me when I walked in. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Please be seated, he said. We're here for closing arguments. Mr. Killian, you may proceed. Killian stood. He buttoned his jacket. Same routine, same confidence. But there was something different in his posture, something defensive. Your Honor, he said, this case has become something it was never meant to be. My client came here seeking justice for his father. He came here because he believed, and still believes, that Victor Hale was taken advantage of in his final days. That belief may have been mistaken, but it was not malicious. He glanced at Damien. Damien Hale is not a perfect man. He's made mistakes. He's borrowed money he couldn't repay. He's been absent when he should have been present. But none of that changes the fundamental question at the heart of this case. Was Victor Hale of sound mind when he disinherited his only son? Killian turned to me. The defendant has done an excellent job of attacking my client's character. She's painted him as a selfish, irresponsible leech, and perhaps some of that is true. But character assassination is not the same as legal evidence. The fact remains that Victor Hale was dying. He was vulnerable. And the defendant was the only person with access to him in those final months. Your Honor, I started to stand, but the judge waved me down. You'll have your turn, Mrs. Mercer. Killian continued, I'm asking this court to consider the possibility that Victor Hale's decision was not made freely, that it was influenced by isolation, by dependence, by a woman who saw an opportunity and took it. My client deserves a portion of his father's estate, not because he's perfect, but because he's family. And family shouldn't be erased with the stroke of a pen. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Mercer, your closing argument. I stood. My legs felt shaky. I walked to the center of the room and looked at the judge. Then I looked at Damien. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. Your Honor, I said, Mr. Killian is right about one thing. Family shouldn't be erased. But family also shouldn't be a weapon, and that's what Damien turned it into. I opened my folder. I have 12 video recordings of my husband, Victor Hale, made over the course of 6 months. In every single one, he's clear, coherent, and adamant about his wishes. He wanted me to have his estate, not because I manipulated him, but because I was there, because I didn't ask for anything except the chance to love him. I pulled out the transcripts and handed them to the bailiff. Victor explains, in his own words, why he made the decision he did. He talks about Damien's financial irresponsibility, his repeated failures, his absence. And yes, Your Honor, he talks about me, about what I gave up to be his wife. I turned to Damien. I was Judge Eleanor Mercer. I had a career, a reputation, a life that didn't revolve around anyone else. And I walked away from it because Victor asked me to, because he needed someone, and I chose to be that person. My voice cracked. I didn't do it for money. I did it because I loved him. And the fact that Damien can't understand that, the fact that he thinks love can only exist if there's a financial motive behind it, that's the saddest part of this entire case. I took a breath. Victor didn't erase Damien from his life. Damien erased himself. He showed up when he needed money and disappeared when he got it. He ignored phone calls. He skipped hospital visits. And when Victor finally had enough and decided to leave his legacy to someone who actually cared, Damien accused me of theft. I looked at the judge. I'm asking this court to uphold Victor's will, not to punish Damien, but to honor the wishes of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. I sat down. The judge made notes. Then he looked up. Mrs. Mercer, do you intend to present the video evidence? I hesitated. Every instinct I had screamed at me to say yes, to play those videos, to let Victor's voice fill the courtroom and obliterate any doubt, to win. But I kept hearing his words from the last recording. Maybe you can be what I never was. I looked at Damien. He was staring at his hands, broken. And I made a decision. No, Your Honor. The courtroom erupted. Whispers, gasps. Even Killian looked shocked. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Mrs. Mercer, can you clarify? I have the recordings, Your Honor. They're available if the court requires them, but I don't think I need to use them, because this case isn't about proving Victor's competence. It's about proving Damien's motive. And I've already done that. I turned to Damien. I'm not going to humiliate you any more than I already have. I'm not going to play videos of your father explaining why he didn't trust you. You know why. Deep down, you've always known. Damien's head snapped up. His eyes were red. But I'm also not going to let you rewrite history, I said. Victor made his choice, and you need to live with it. I sat down. The judge looked at Killian. Mr. Killian, do you have a rebuttal? Killian stood slowly. He looked at Damien, then at me. No, Your Honor, I think we've heard enough. The judge leaned back. I'll take a short recess to review the evidence. We'll reconvene in 1 hour for my ruling. Everyone stood as he left. I gathered my files with trembling hands. I just refused to use the one piece of evidence that could have guaranteed my victory. And I had no idea if it was the right choice or the dumbest thing I'd ever done. Killian approached me as the courtroom emptied. That was either brilliant or suicidal, he said. I don't know which. You could have buried him. I know. He studied me. Why didn't you? Because I'm not my husband, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life destroying a man who's already destroyed himself. Killian nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. You think I'm going to lose? No, he said. I think you're going to win. But you just gave Damien something he doesn't deserve. What's that? A chance to walk out of here with his dignity. He turned and walked away. I sat alone in the courtroom, staring at the empty judge's bench. 1 hour later, we were all back. The judge entered. Everyone stood. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. "Please be seated," the judge said. The room went silent. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented in this case, the testimony, the financial records, the medical evaluations, and I've come to a conclusion." He looked at Damien. "Mr. Hale, I understand that you're grieving. Losing a parent is one of the hardest experiences a person can go through, and it's natural to feel anger, to look for someone to blame. But grief does not give you the right to accuse someone of a crime they didn't commit." Damien's face went pale. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Mercer, I've presided over estate disputes for 23 years. I've seen genuine cases of undue influence. I've seen elderly people manipulated, isolated, coerced. This is not one of those cases." He picked up a document. Victor Hale was examined by his physician multiple times in the months before his death. He was deemed competent, alert, capable of making decisions. The will was properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. There's no evidence of coercion, no evidence of fraud, no evidence of undue influence. He looked at Damien again. "What I do see is a pattern of financial dependence. $300,000 borrowed over 10 years. None of it repaid. Multiple failed business ventures funded by your father, and a dramatic reduction in contact after he refused to provide additional funds." Damien looked like he was going to be sick. "Mr. Hale," the judge said, "your father didn't cut you out of his will because he was manipulated. He cut you out because he was tired of being used." The courtroom was dead silent. "Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the defendant. The will of Victor Hale shall stand as written. Evelyn Mercer is the rightful heir to his estate. This case is dismissed." He banged the gavel. It was over. People started talking all at once. Reporters rushed for the doors. Cameras flashed. I sat there, unable to move. Killian stood and shook Damien's hand. Damien didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at nothing. Then he stood, and he walked toward me. I tensed. "Evelyn," he said. "Damien." He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were empty. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know. I wanted him to see me. Just once. The way he saw you." My throat tightened. "He did see you, Damien. He just didn't like what he saw." Damien flinched. "But that doesn't mean it's too late," I added. He looked at me confused. "Your father left you out of the will for a reason, but that doesn't mean you can't change. That doesn't mean you're stuck being this person forever." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not your enemy. I never was. And if you ever want to have a real conversation, not about money, not about inheritance, but about who your father really was, I'm willing to have it." Damien's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve that." "No," I said, "you don't. But I'm offering it anyway." He stood there for a moment, frozen. Then he turned and walked away. I watched him leave. My stepson. The boy I'd tried so hard to reach and failed. The man who'd tried to destroy me and lost. I didn't know if he'd ever take me up on that offer, but I'd meant it. Later that night, I sat in Victor's study with a glass of wine I didn't drink. The house was silent. Maria had gone home. The reporters had finally cleared out. It was just me and the ghost. I'd won. The estate was mine. The lawsuit was over. Damien had been defeated, humiliated, exposed. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder with Victor's videos. I stared at the files for a long time. Then I copied them onto a separate drive. Tomorrow, I'd send them to Damien. Not to hurt him, not to prove a point, but because he deserved to hear what his father really thought, not filtered through lawyers or courtroom drama. Just Victor's voice, his truth. Maybe it would destroy him all over again. Or maybe it would save him. Either way, it wasn't my choice to make. I closed the laptop and looked around the study. Victor's books, his desk, his chair, the life we'd built together. I'd spent 30 years being his wife, being Evelyn, and I'd spent 3 weeks being Eleanor again. I didn't know who I was supposed to be now, but I knew one thing. I was done letting other people decide for me. I finished the wine, turned off the lights, and went upstairs. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what came next. Tonight, I just needed to sleep. But when I reached the bedroom, I found an envelope on the pillow. My name was written on it in Maria's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a single note. Mrs. Mercer, this came for you today. The courier said it was urgent. Maria. Attached to the note was a letter. Official looking, legal. I opened it with shaking hands. It was from Victor's estate attorney, Gerald. Evelyn, there's something Victor asked me to give you after the trial was over. Win or lose. He made me promise. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. Please come to my office tomorrow at 9. Gerald. I stared at the letter. What the hell had Victor done now? I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, that letter burning a hole in my mind. What could Victor possibly have left for me that Gerald hadn't already mentioned? The will had been read. The estate was settled. The lawsuit was over. What else was there? At 6 in the morning, I gave up trying to rest. I showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater. I was done with courtroom clothes, and made coffee I couldn't drink. My hands shook every time I tried to lift the cup. Maria arrived at 7:30 and found me pacing in the kitchen. Mrs. Mercer, you look terrible. Thanks, Maria. Did you sleep at all? No? She poured herself coffee and sat down at the table. What's wrong? I showed her Gerald's letter. She read it twice. What do you think it is? I have no idea, and that's what's killing me. Could be something good, or something terrible. Mrs. Mercer, you just won. The house is yours. The money is yours. What could be terrible? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. But Victor had a habit of dropping bombs when you least expected them, even from beyond the grave, apparently. At 8:15, I got in my car and drove to Gerald's office. The building was downtown, all glass and steel and expensive views. I'd been here dozens of times with Victor. Business meetings, contract signings, the reading of the will after he died. I hated this place. Gerald's secretary smiled when I walked in. Mrs. Mercer, he's expecting you. Go right in. Gerald stood when I entered. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, tie loosened, coffee cup stained. Evelyn, congratulations on yesterday. Thanks. I sat down. What is this about, Gerald? He closed the door, then he walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a sealed envelope. Thick, heavy. My name written on it in Victor's handwriting. My stomach dropped. Victor gave this to me 6 months ago, Gerald said. He told me not to open it, not to tell you about it, just to give it to you after the trial was over. Win or lose. What's in it? I don't know. He sealed it in front of me and made me swear I wouldn't look. He handed it to me. I stared at it. My hands were shaking again. Do you want me to leave? Gerald asked. No, stay. I tore open the envelope. Inside was another letter, an illegal document. I unfolded the letter first, Victor's handwriting, shaky but deliberate. The letter started with 2 words that made my heart stop. I lied. I read the rest in silence, my vision blurring. When I finished, I couldn't breathe. Gerald leaned forward. Evelyn? What does it say? I handed him the letter without a word. He read it. His face went pale. Oh my God. Yeah. Gerald set the letter down carefully, like it might explode. Evelyn, do you understand what this means? I think so. This changes everything. I know. We sat there in silence for a long moment. Then Gerald said, What are you going to do? I looked at the legal document Victor had included, a codicil to the will, signed, notarized, legitimate, and devastating. I don't know, I whispered. Victor's letter was short, but every word was a knife. Evelyn, I lied to you. For 30 years I lied. When I asked you to give up your career, I told you it was because I needed you, because I was lonely, because I wanted a partner, not just a wife. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The real reason I asked you to quit was because I was terrified of you. You were brilliant, Evelyn. Everyone knew it. You were going to be on the state Supreme Court within 5 years, maybe the federal bench after that. You were building something extraordinary, and I couldn't stand it because it made me feel small. I was a rich man, a successful man. But next to you, I was nothing. You had respect, authority, a legacy that had nothing to do with money. And I hated that. I hated that you didn't need me. So I made you need me. I asked you to give up your career. I told you I wanted you home. I made it sound romantic, a sacrifice for love. But really, I just wanted to cut you down to a size I could handle. And you did it. You walked away from everything because I asked you to. That's the part I can't forgive myself for. You loved me, Evelyn. Truly loved me. And I used that love to make myself feel powerful. I'm writing this now because I'm dying. And because I need you to know the truth. Not so you'll forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve to know who you really sacrificed for. I was selfish, manipulative, a coward, and I'm sorry. The codicil attached to this letter gives you a choice. You can keep the estate as it stands, or you can activate the trust I set up for Damien. It's not the whole inheritance, but it's enough for him to start over, enough for him to have a real chance. I'm leaving that decision to you because you're a better person than I ever was. Whatever you choose, I'll deserve it. I love you, Evelyn. I always did. I just loved myself more. Victor. I read the letter 3 more times. Each time it hurt worse. Gerald cleared his throat. Evelyn, I need to ask. Did you know about this? No? He never said anything? Never. And the trust for Damien. Did you know that existed? I looked at the codicil. It outlined a trust fund worth $2 million. Not the full estate. Not even close. But enough to change Damien's life. Victor had set it up 6 months before he died. The same time he'd made the videos. The same time he'd written this letter. He'd planned all of it. I had no idea, I said. Gerald leaned back. Legally, you don't have to activate it. The will as written is valid. The court upheld it. This codicil is optional. Victor left it up to you. Why would he do that? Because he wanted you to decide if Damien deserved a second chance. I laughed. It came out bitter. That's not fair. No, it's not. He's making me the villain either way. If I keep the money, I'm the greedy widow who took everything. If I give it to Damien, I'm the fool who let herself be manipulated. Or, Gerald said quietly, you're the woman who gets to define her own legacy. I looked at him. Victor made a lot of mistakes, Gerald continued. But he was right about one thing. You're a better person than he was, and whatever you decide, it'll be for the right reasons. Not ego, not revenge, just what you think is fair. And if I don't know what's fair, then you figure it out. I stood. I need to think. Take your time. Legally, there's no rush. I grabbed the codicil and the letter and walked out. The next few days were torture. I couldn't focus. Couldn't eat. Couldn't stop reading that letter over and over, looking for something I'd missed, some clue that would tell me what the right choice was. But there wasn't one. Victor had laid it all out. His selfishness, his manipulation, his guilt. And then he dumped the consequences in my lap. Maria found me in the study on the 3rd day, surrounded by legal documents and half-empty coffee cups. Mrs. Mercer, you're going to make yourself sick. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't left this house in 3 days. I'm thinking. You're torturing yourself. She sat down across from me. What's in that letter? She asked. What did Mr. Hale say? I hesitated. Then I handed it to her. She read it slowly. When she finished, she set it down carefully. That bastard, she said quietly. Yeah. All those years I thought he was such a good man. He treated you so well. He talked about you like you were everything, and this whole time, he was scared of me. Maria shook her head. He didn't deserve you. Maybe, but I loved him anyway. That's not love, Mrs. Mercer. That's sacrifice. Is there a difference? Maria looked at me for a long moment. Yes, love should make you bigger, not smaller. I felt tears burn my eyes. So what are you going to do? She asked. About Damien. About the trust. I don't know. Do you want to give it to him? Part of me does. Part of me thinks Victor's right. Damien deserves a chance. He's broken, but he's not beyond saving. And the other part? The other part is furious. Damien tried to destroy me. He called me a liar, a thief. He dragged me through hell because he couldn't accept that his father didn't want him to have the money. Why should I reward that? You shouldn't, Maria said, but this isn't about rewarding him. It's about whether you want to carry Victor's guilt for the rest of your life. What do you mean? Victor felt guilty for what he did to Damien, for ruining him. And instead of dealing with it himself, he's making you deal with it. He's putting his choices on you. And if you activate that trust, you're saying it's okay, that you forgive him, that you'll clean up his mess. I stared at her. You think I should keep the money? I think you should do what's right for you, not for Victor, not for Damien, for you. She stood. And I think you already know what that is. You're just scared to admit it. She left me alone. I sat there in the dark, her words echoing in my head. And slowly, I started to understand. I wasn't struggling with what to do about Damien. I was struggling with what to do about Victor. Because giving Damien that trust meant accepting Victor's apology. It meant forgiving him for what he'd done to me, for the 30 years he'd stolen, for the career I'd given up, for the life I could have had. And I didn't know if I could do that. That night I dreamed about the courtroom. Not the real courtroom. A twisted version of it. Victor was sitting at the judge's bench, alive and healthy, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. Evelyn, he said, you need to make a decision. I know. Are you going to give Damien the money? I don't know. Why not? Because you lied to me, Victor. For 30 years you lied. He nodded. I did. You made me give up everything, and you did it because you were scared of me. Yes. How am I supposed to forgive that? Victor leaned forward. You're not. I don't want you to forgive me, Evelyn. I want you to be free. Free from what? From me. From Damien. From all of this. I trapped you in a life you never wanted. Don't let me trap you in death too. I woke up in tears, and I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called Gerald. I've made my decision, I said. Okay, what do you want to do? I want to activate the trust, but I have conditions. What kind of conditions? Damien gets the money, but not all at once. It goes into a managed trust that pays out over 10 years, and only if he meets certain requirements. What requirements? He has to get a job, a real job. Not something his name gets him, something he has to work for. And he has to pay back the $300,000 he borrowed from Victor. Not from the trust, from his own income. Gerald was quiet. That's going to take him years. I know, but if he's serious about changing, he'll do it. And if he's not, he doesn't deserve the money anyway. Anything else? Yes, he has to meet with me. Once a year, just to talk. No lawyers, no cameras, just the two of us. Why? Because Victor was right about one thing. Damien's broken. And maybe I can't fix him, but I can at least try to understand him. Gerald exhaled. You're a better person than most, Evelyn. No, I'm not. I'm just tired of being angry. I'll draw up the paperwork. Thank you, Gerald. I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring at Victor's letter. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. Maybe I never would be. But I was ready to stop letting him control my life. 2 weeks later, Gerald called Damien to his office. I wasn't there. I didn't want to be. This was something Damien needed to hear without me in the room, but Gerald told me about it afterward. Damien had walked in expecting another legal battle, another accusation, another fight. Instead, Gerald handed him the trust documents. What is this? Damien asked. It's from your father and from Evelyn. Damien read the terms. Gerald said his face went through about 10 different emotions: shock, confusion, anger, disbelief. She's giving me money? Your father set up a trust before he died. Evelyn had the option to activate it. She chose to. Why? You'll have to ask her. Damien stared at the paperwork. There are conditions. Yes. I have to get a job. I have to pay him back. I have to meet with her every year. That's right. Why would she do this? I tried to destroy her. Gerald leaned forward. Because she's not interested in revenge, Damien. She's interested in the truth. And the truth is your father failed you, and Evelyn doesn't want to keep failing you just because he did. Damien was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't deserve this. No, Gerald agreed. You don't. But that's the point. Damien signed the paperwork. 3 days later, he called me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Evelyn? Hi, Damien. There was a long pause. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Yes, I do. You didn't have to do this after everything I put you through. You could have kept it all, and no one would have blamed you. I know. So why didn't you? I thought about that. Because I'm not your father, Damien, and I'm not interested in punishing you for the rest of your life. You made mistakes, big ones, but that doesn't mean you're beyond saving. His voice cracked. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you think I can be. Then figure it out. You have 10 years. That's more than most people get. What if I screw it up? Then you screw it up, but at least you'll have tried. There was a long silence. Thank you, Damien said finally. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you. You're welcome. I hung up, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The months that followed were strange. The press eventually moved on. The reporters stopped calling. The whispers at the grocery store faded. People found new scandals to obsess over. I sold Victor's company. I didn't want to run it. Didn't want the responsibility. Didn't want the reminder. A private equity firm bought it for more than it was worth, and I walked away with enough money to last 3 lifetimes. I kept the house, but I gutted Victor's study, took out the desk, the bookshelves, the leather chair, repainted the walls, turned it into something new. Maria stayed. She was the only constant in a life that was suddenly, terrifyingly open. What are you going to do now? She asked me one afternoon. I don't know. You can do anything, Mrs. Mercer. You have money. You have time. You have your whole life ahead of you. I'm 68 years old, Maria. So, you're not dead? I laughed. No, I guess I'm not. So what do you want? Really want? I thought about that for a long time, and then I knew. 6 months after the trial, I opened a law practice. Not a big one, just me in a small office downtown, specializing in estate law, elder law, cases where someone needed protection from family members who saw them as a bank account instead of a person. I called it Mercer Legal Services, not Hale. Mercer, because I wasn't Victor's widow anymore. I was Eleanor. Judge Eleanor Mercer, and I was done hiding. The first client was a 72-year-old woman whose son was trying to have her declared incompetent so he could access her savings. She sat in my office, crying, telling me no one would believe her. I believe you, I said. We won that case in 3 weeks. Word spread. More clients came, women mostly, a few men, people who'd been discarded, dismissed, told they were too old to matter. I gave them their voices back. Damien called me on the anniversary of the trial. You said we had to meet once a year, he said. Is that still true? Yes. Can I come by? Okay. He showed up at my office the next day. He looked different, thinner, tired, but also focused. I got a job, he said. Doing what? Sales, medical equipment. It's boring, the pay's terrible, but it's mine. That's good, Damien. I've been paying Dad back, $50 a week. I know it's not much. It's a start. He nodded. Evelyn, I need to ask you something. What? Why did you really give me the money? Was it because you felt sorry for me? Because you wanted to prove you were better than Dad? No? Then why? I looked at him. Because I didn't want to become the kind of person who kicks someone when they're down. And because I think people deserve second chances, even when they don't deserve them. Damien's eyes filled with tears. I'm trying, Evelyn. I really am. I know. Do you think Dad would be proud of me? I thought about Victor, his lies, his guilt, his desperate last-minute attempt to fix what he'd broken. I think your father would be relieved, I said, but it doesn't matter what he'd think. What matters is whether you're proud of you. Damien wiped his eyes. I'm getting there. That's all anyone can ask. He left an hour later. We didn't hug. We didn't pretend everything was fixed, but it was something, a beginning. That night I sat in my office alone looking at the framed law degree on the wall. Judge Eleanor Mercer, Harvard Law, class of 1982. I'd buried that woman for 30 years. And now she was back. Not the same. Not untouched, but back. And stronger than ever. Victor had tried to make me small. He tried to trap me in a life where I needed him more than he needed me. But he'd failed. Because I was never the helpless widow they thought I was. I was a fighter, a survivor, a force. And I was done apologizing for it. I turned off the lights and locked the office door. Tomorrow, there'd be another case. Another client. Another fight. And I'd be ready. The law practice grew faster than Evelyn expected. Within 8 months, she had to hire an assistant, then a paralegal, then another lawyer. By the end of the first year, Mercer Legal Services had handled 43 cases and won 39 of them. The losses hurt. They always did. But Evelyn learned to carry them differently than she had in her judge days. Back then, a loss felt like a failure of the system. Now, it felt personal. These were real people who'd trusted her, who'd walked into her office broken and desperate, hoping she could save them. She couldn't save everyone, but she tried. One case in particular stuck with her. An 81-year-old man named Raymond whose daughter had taken power of attorney and emptied his bank accounts. Raymond came to Evelyn's office in clothes that hadn't been washed in weeks, his hands shaking, his voice barely above a whisper. She said I was too old to manage my own money, he told Evelyn. Said I'd forget where I put it, so I signed the papers, and then she took everything. Evelyn had seen this pattern before. Adult children who justified theft with concern, who convinced themselves they were protecting their parents when really they were protecting their own futures. Raymond's daughter had drained $83,000 over 6 months, transferred it to her own account, used it to pay off her mortgage, buy a new car, take a vacation to Hawaii. What did she say when you confronted her? Evelyn asked. Raymond's hands trembled worse. She said I was confused, that I'd given her permission, that I didn't remember because of my age. Do you have memory problems, Raymond? I forget things sometimes. Names, where I put my keys, but I remember my bank account. I remember working 40 years to save that money, and I remember her taking it. Evelyn took the case for free. Raymond didn't have money for a lawyer. His daughter had made sure of that. The trial was ugly. The daughter showed up with her own attorney, a slick young man who tried to paint Raymond as senile, incompetent, a danger to himself. They brought in a psychologist who'd never met Raymond, but testified based on typical age-related cognitive decline. They showed bank statements proving Raymond had signed the power of attorney documents. What they didn't show was the context, the pressure, the manipulation. Evelyn destroyed them. She brought in Raymond's primary care physician, who testified that Raymond was sharp, oriented, fully capable of managing his affairs. She brought in neighbors who'd known Raymond for 30 years, who said he was the same man he'd always been. She showed emails from the daughter, dozens of them, pressuring Raymond to sign over control, threatening to put him in a nursing home if he didn't comply. You told your father that if he didn't give you power of attorney, you'd have him declared incompetent and committed, Evelyn said during cross-examination. Isn't that correct? The daughter's face went red. I was trying to help him. By threatening him? He was being stubborn. He was being independent, and you couldn't stand it. The judge ruled in Raymond's favor. Full restitution plus damages. The daughter was ordered to pay back every penny, plus interest, plus $15,000 in punitive damages. She was also charged with elder abuse. Raymond cried when he heard the verdict. Evelyn won that case, got Raymond his money back, got the daughter charged with elder abuse. But the victory felt hollow because Raymond died 3 weeks later. Heart attack. The doctor said the stress had been too much. His body had held on just long enough to see justice, then given up. At his funeral, Raymond's son approached Evelyn. He was younger than the daughter, lived out of state, hadn't known what was happening until it was too late. He talked about you, the son said, every day after the trial. Said you were the only person who believed him, the only one who treated him like he still mattered. Evelyn couldn't speak. She just nodded, her throat tight. Thank you, the son said, for giving him his dignity back, even if it was just for a little while. He died knowing someone had fought for him. That matters more than you know. That night, Evelyn went home and cried for an hour straight. Maria found her in the kitchen, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. Mrs. Mercer? I'm okay. You're not okay. Evelyn looked up. Her eyes were swollen, mascara smeared. I got him his money back, Maria. I won, and he still died. That's not your fault, isn't it? If I'd worked faster, if I'd pushed harder, if I'd... Stop! Maria sat down across from her, grabbed her hands. You did everything you could. And you gave that man something his own daughter took from him. You gave him respect. You gave him justice. You gave him the knowledge that someone cared enough to fight. That matters. That always matters. Does it? He's still dead. Yes, but he died with his dignity intact. He died knowing the truth came out. That's not nothing, Mrs. Mercer. Evelyn wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know if it's enough. It's never enough. But it's what we have. And you keep doing it anyway. That's what makes you different. The second year was harder than the first. More clients, more cases, more stories of families torn apart by greed, by resentment, by children who saw their aging parents as obstacles instead of people. Evelyn worked 12-hour days, sometimes 14. She skipped meals. She forgot to sleep. She'd wake up at 3 in the morning with her mind racing through depositions and cross-examinations. Her assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa, who'd worked as a paralegal for 15 years before joining Evelyn's practice, started leaving protein bars on her desk with notes that said, "Eat this or I quit." Evelyn ate them. Most of the time. Lisa was relentless, 28 years old, brilliant, and completely unafraid to tell Evelyn when she was being stupid, which was often. You can't take every case that walks through that door, Lisa said one afternoon, blocking Evelyn's office doorway. You're one person. You're going to burn out. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've lost weight. You look exhausted. And yesterday you called opposing counsel by the wrong name 3 times. Evelyn rubbed her temples. I have a lot on my mind. I know, but you're not helping anyone if you collapse. Take a day off, sleep, eat a real meal. Remember what those are? I'll think about it. That's not good enough. Lisa, I'm serious, Mrs. Mercer. Take a day off or I'm staging an intervention. And trust me, you don't want that. Evelyn took the day off. She spent it in her garden, something she hadn't done in months. The roses needed pruning, the weeds had taken over. She worked until her back ached and her hands were covered in dirt, and for the first time in weeks her mind went quiet. That evening, she sat on the back porch with a glass of wine and watched the sunset. Maria came out and sat beside her. Better? Yeah, better. Lisa told me she threatened you. She's very persuasive. She's right, though. You can't save everyone, Mrs. Mercer. You'll kill yourself trying. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. I know. But when I see these people, when they come into my office so broken, so scared, I see myself. 3 years ago, sitting in that courtroom fighting for my life, and I can't turn them away. Then hire more lawyers, build a bigger practice, but don't sacrifice yourself. That's not honor. That's just martyrdom. Evelyn thought about that. You're very wise, Maria. I'm old. There's a difference. They sat in silence, watching the sky turn purple, then dark. One afternoon, about 18 months into the practice, Lisa knocked on Evelyn's office door. Mrs. Mercer, you have a walk-in. I'm booked today. I know, but she says it's urgent, and she's crying. Evelyn sighed and closed the file she was reviewing. Send her in. The woman who walked through the door was young, maybe 30. She had a baby on her hip and fear in her eyes that Evelyn recognized instantly, the fear of someone who was about to lose everything. Mrs. Mercer? Yes, please sit down. The woman sat carefully, like the chair might break. The baby squirmed. She held him tighter, her knuckles white. My name is Rachel Brennan. My husband's family is trying to take my son. Evelyn leaned forward, giving Rachel her full attention. Tell me what happened. My husband died 6 months ago. Car accident. He was driving home from work and a truck ran a red light. Killed him instantly. Rachel's voice cracked. And his parents, they blame me. They say if I hadn't called him, if he hadn't been distracted, he wouldn't have been at that intersection at that exact moment. That's not rational. I know. But grief isn't rational. They needed someone to blame and I was there. Rachel adjusted the baby on her lap. After the funeral, they started coming around more, wanting to see Ethan, wanting to help. At first I thought they were being kind. Then they started criticizing everything. How I fed him, how I dressed him. They said I looked tired, that I wasn't coping. Were you coping? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. No, I was falling apart. My husband was dead. I had a 6-month-old baby. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I cried all the time. So I went to see my doctor and she prescribed medication for depression. I've been on antidepressants for years. They help. But after James died, I needed something stronger. That's completely understandable. Tell that to his parents. They found out about the medication and lost their minds. Said I was drugged up, not fit to care for Ethan. They filed for custody 2 weeks later. Evelyn felt anger rise in her chest. On what grounds? Mental instability. Inability to provide adequate care. They have money, Mrs. Mercer. A lot of it. They hired one of the best family law attorneys in the state. And I have nothing. I can barely afford rent. I can't fight them. But I can't lose my son. The baby started to fuss. Rachel bounced him automatically. Years of motherhood in that simple gesture. Do you love your son, Rachel? More than anything in this world. And you're willing to fight for him? I'll do whatever it takes. Evelyn opened her laptop. Then let's get started. The case took 4 months and consumed Evelyn completely. Rachel's in-laws were wealthy, connected, and absolutely ruthless. They hired Marcus Killian, the same lawyer who'd represented Damien, the man who never lost. When Evelyn saw his name on the opposing counsel list, she almost laughed. You know him? Lisa asked. We've met. Is that good or bad? It's interesting. The first hearing was brutal. Killian brought in a psychologist who'd never met Rachel but testified extensively about postpartum depression, the dangers of medication, the risks to the child. He brought in a social worker who'd done a home visit and noted that Rachel's apartment was cluttered and she looked unkempt. Mrs. Brennan appears overwhelmed and potentially unable to meet the child's needs, the social worker testified. Evelyn stood for cross-examination. When you visited Mrs. Brennan's home, what time was it? 2 in the afternoon. And Mrs. Brennan had just come home from work, correct? I believe so. She works as a nurse, 12-hour shifts at the hospital. Is that correct? The social worker checked her notes. Yes. So she'd been working since 2 in the morning, came home, picked up her son from daycare, and you showed up unannounced to inspect her apartment. It was a scheduled visit. Scheduled by the grandparents, without informing my client of the specific time. So Mrs. Brennan had been awake for over 12 hours, worked a full shift saving lives, and you judged her for looking tired? I was assessing her ability to... You were assessing whether she looked pretty enough for you, whether her apartment met your standards of cleanliness. But you didn't assess whether the child was fed, healthy, happy. Did you? The social worker hesitated. The child appeared well cared for. More than appeared. According to your own notes, Ethan was clean, properly dressed, well-fed, and developmentally on track. Correct? Yes. So the only problem you found was that a single working mother who just lost her husband looked tired in her own home. Killian objected. The judge sustained it, but the damage was done. Evelyn spent the next 3 months building Rachel's case piece by piece. She brought in Rachel's therapist, who testified that Rachel was stable, compliant with treatment, actively working through her grief in healthy ways. She brought in Rachel's supervisor from the hospital, who said Rachel was an excellent nurse, reliable, compassionate, never let her personal issues affect her work. She brought in neighbors who testified that Rachel was a devoted mother, that they often heard her singing to Ethan, playing with him, that the sound of that baby's laughter filled the hallways. I've never once heard that child cry for more than a minute or two, one elderly neighbor testified. Rachel's always right there, day or night. That's a good mother. And then Evelyn did something Killian didn't expect. She called the grandparents to the stand. Rachel's father-in-law, Robert Brennan, was a corporate executive, CEO of a manufacturing company. Used to being in control, used to getting his way. He walked to the witness stand with the confidence of a man who'd never lost anything he actually cared about. Evelyn let him get comfortable, let him explain how much he loved his grandson, how concerned he was, how he only wanted what was best for the child. Then she struck. Mr. Brennan, you claim my client is unfit to raise your grandson. That's correct. And your evidence for this is her depression and the fact that she takes medication. Among other things. Have you spent time with Ethan since your son passed away? He hesitated. We've tried, but Rachel has made it difficult. Difficult how? She won't return our calls. She won't let us visit without supervision. She's kept him from us. Evelyn pulled out phone records, months of them, highlighted in yellow. According to these records, you called Rachel twice in the 6 months following your son's death. Once to inform her of the funeral arrangements. Once to tell her you were filing for custody. Is that correct? Mr. Brennan's jaw tightened. We wanted to give her space. Or you didn't care about Ethan until you realized he was the only piece of your son you had left. That's not true, isn't it? Mr. Brennan, how many times did you visit your grandson before your son died? We saw him regularly. How many times? I don't remember exactly. I have Rachel's calendar. She kept detailed records because she wanted Ethan to know his grandparents. According to her notes, you visited exactly 3 times in Ethan's first 6 months of life. 3 times. And one of those was Christmas. Mr. Brennan's face reddened. We were busy. Too busy for your grandson. But now you have time. Now that your son is dead and you need something to fill that hole. We're trying to protect him. From what? A mother who loves him? Or from the reality that your son is gone and no amount of custody battles will bring him back? The courtroom went silent. Mr. Brennan's hands were shaking. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. You're using this child as a replacement for your grief. You're trying to take him from his mother because it makes you feel less empty. And that's not love, Mr. Brennan. That's selfishness. Killian was on his feet. Objection. Your Honor, counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Mrs. Mercer, move on. But Evelyn wasn't done. Mr. Brennan, when Rachel was hospitalized for her breakdown, did you visit her? No. Did you offer to help with childcare? We weren't asked. Did you send food, money, any kind of support? We didn't think You didn't think at all. You did nothing. And now you want to take her son because you've decided she's not good enough. You didn't help her. You didn't support her. You waited until she was at her lowest and then you attacked. Mr. Brennan's eyes were wet. She's not capable. She's more capable than you'll ever be. Because she's still standing, she's still fighting, she's still loving that child even though her entire world fell apart. What have you done except try to make it worse? Evelyn turned to the judge. No further questions. The hearing ended an hour later. Evelyn and Rachel stood outside the courthouse. Rachel was shaking, holding Ethan so tight the baby started to squirm. What happens now? Rachel asked. We wait for the judge to rule. How long? Could be a week. Could be a month. I can't do this for a month. Yes, you can. You've done it this long. You can do it a little longer. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. What if we lose? We won't. But what if we do? Evelyn took Rachel's hand. Then we appeal, and we keep fighting, and we don't stop until Ethan is safe. I promise you, Rachel, I will not let them take your son. The judge ruled 2 weeks later. Full custody to the mother. Supervised visitation for the grandparents, contingent on family therapy, and evidence of a constructive relationship with Rachel. The court finds no evidence that Mrs. Brennan is unfit, the judge wrote in his decision. Depression is not a moral failing, grief is not a crime, and seeking help is not a sign of weakness. Mrs. Brennan has demonstrated appropriate care for her child, maintained stable employment, and actively engaged in treatment. The grandparents' concern appears to stem more from their own loss than from any genuine risk to the child. Rachel sobbed when she read the decision. She called Evelyn immediately. We won. Oh, God, we won. I told you we would. I don't know how to thank you. You already have. Every time you show up for your son, that's all the thanks I need. The grandparents appealed. They lost. 6 months later, Evelyn got a card in the mail. Inside was a photo of Rachel and Ethan at the park. The baby was toddling now, chasing pigeons, laughing. Rachel looked different, healthier, lighter. The card said, You gave me my life back. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Evelyn pinned it to the wall in her office. It stayed there for years. Damien showed up for his second annual meeting on a Tuesday afternoon in October. He looked better this time, healthier. His clothes fit properly. His hair was cut. He'd shaved. There was something different in his posture, less defensive, more settled. You look good, Evelyn said. Thanks. I've been working out, trying to get my life together. He sat down in the chair across from her desk. How have you been? Busy. The practice is growing. I've been reading about you. Some of your cases made the news. A few. That custody battle last month. With the grandparents. That was you, right? It was. Damien nodded slowly. You destroyed them. They were trying to take a child from a grieving mother. They deserved it. I'm not judging. I'm impressed. You're really good at this. I was always good at this. I just forgot for a while. They sat in silence for a moment. How's the job? Evelyn asked. Still boring, but I got promoted. I'm a regional manager now. That's great, Damien. Yeah, it is. The pay's better. Benefits are decent. I'm actually building something. He paused. I've been paying Dad back. I'm up to 12,000 so far. That's a lot of progress. It's not enough, but it's something. I figure at this rate, I'll have it all paid back in about 15 years. He laughed, but it was hollow. That's a long time. It's the time it takes. There's no shortcut. I know. He looked down at his hands. I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. Why do you keep doing this, meeting with me, checking in? You don't have to. The trust is set up. The terms are clear. You could forget I exist. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Because I don't want to forget you exist, Damien. You're still Victor's son, and whether I like it or not, you're part of my life, part of my story. Even after what I did to you? Even after. Damien looked at her for a long moment. I think about that trial sometimes, about the things I said, the things I accused you of, and I'm ashamed. Good. You should be. Do you forgive me? Evelyn considered that question carefully. Did she forgive him? She didn't know. The anger had faded, mostly, but forgiveness felt like too big a word for what she felt, more like acceptance, like understanding. I'm working on it, she said finally. That's fair. Damien took a breath. I met someone. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. A woman? Yeah, her name's Claire. She's a teacher, 3rd grade. She's really something, Evelyn. Tell me about her. She's smart, funny, patient. Way more patient than I deserve. She doesn't know who my dad was. Doesn't care about the money or the name. She just likes me. For me. That's wonderful, Damien. It is. But it's also terrifying because I don't want to screw this up. And I don't know how to be the person she thinks I am. Then be honest with her. Tell her who you were. Tell her who you're trying to become. And let her decide if that's enough. Damien was quiet. What if it's not? Then it's not. But at least you'll know. And at least you'll have tried. He nodded slowly. Did you ever forgive Dad? For what he did to you? The question hit Evelyn harder than she expected. She thought about Victor's letter, about the confession that had shattered everything she thought she knew about their marriage, about the 30 years she'd given up because he was too insecure to let her be powerful. No, she said quietly. I don't think I have. Do you think you ever will? I don't know. Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Then what is? Moving forward, building something new. Not letting the past define everything that comes after. She looked at Damien directly. Your father made mistakes, terrible ones, but he also gave you a chance to change. He set up that trust knowing you'd probably fail, hoping you wouldn't, and so far you haven't. That counts for something. Does it count enough? That's up to you to decide. Damien stood. Thanks, Evelyn, for everything. You're welcome. He walked to the door, then turned back. I'd like you to meet her, Claire, if that's okay. I'd like that. Maybe dinner sometime? Just tell me when. He smiled, a real smile. Then he left. Evelyn sat alone in her office, thinking about forgiveness, about Victor, about whether she'd ever be able to let go of the anger she still carried like a stone in her chest. She didn't have an answer, but she was learning to live with the question. 3 years after the trial, Evelyn received an invitation in the mail. It was from a local women's shelter. They were hosting a fundraiser and wanted her to speak about her work, about the women she'd helped, about fighting for justice when the system tried to look away. We've heard about the work you do, the director said when Evelyn called her back. The women you help, the cases you take that no one else will touch. You're exactly the kind of person we want to represent us." Evelyn hesitated. She didn't like public speaking, never had. Even as a judge, delivering rulings from the bench had always made her nervous. "I'm not really a public speaker," she said. "You were a judge for 20 years. You argued cases before that. I think you'll manage." "I don't know what I'd say." "Tell your story, tell the truth. That's all anyone wants to hear." Evelyn agreed, though she regretted it immediately. The event was held in a hotel ballroom, 200 people, donors, activists, survivors, journalists. Evelyn stood backstage, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode, wondering what the hell she'd agreed to. Her hands were sweating, her mouth was dry. She'd written note cards, but they felt useless now. Lisa stood next to her. "You're going to be great." "I'm going to throw up." "You're not going to throw up." "How do you know?" "Because you faced down worse than this. You faced down Marcus Killian, twice. This is just talking. Talking in front of 200 people, who all want to hear what you have to say." The director of the shelter appeared, smiled warmly, and gestured to the stage. "You're up." Evelyn walked to the wings, her legs shaking. Then the director stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eleanor Mercer, attorney, advocate, and a woman who has spent the last 3 years fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. A woman who knows what it means to be dismissed, underestimated, and counted out, and who came back stronger than ever." The applause was overwhelming, loud, sustained. Evelyn walked to the podium, the lights blinding, her hands gripping the edges to keep them from shaking. She looked out at the crowd, all those faces, all those people waiting for her to say something meaningful, something that mattered. She took a breath. "My name is Eleanor Mercer, and for 30 years I didn't exist." The room went quiet, every eye on her. I was Evelyn, the wife, the hostess, the woman who smiled at dinner parties and made sure the house looked perfect and never caused trouble. I gave up my career as a judge because my husband asked me to, and I told myself it was love. That sacrifice was the same thing as devotion. She paused, her voice steadier now. "It wasn't." Someone in the front row gasped. "Love doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller. Love doesn't require you to give up your dreams, your ambitions, your sense of self. Real love builds you up. It doesn't tear you down. And for 30 years I let myself be torn down because I thought that's what good wives did." Evelyn's hands relaxed on the podium. "My husband died 3 years ago, and his son tried to take everything from me. He called me a liar, a manipulator, a gold digger. He dragged me through court and tried to destroy me in front of the entire city. And for a while, I let him, because I'd spent so long being small that I forgot I was ever anything else." She looked directly at the audience. "But I wasn't small. I was never small. I was a judge. I was powerful. I was brilliant. I had built a career on justice and fairness and standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. And I'd buried all of that because someone convinced me that being a good wife meant being less." The room was silent except for the sound of people shifting in their seats, leaning forward. "I won that court case. I got my husband's estate. I got my dignity back. And then I did something I never expected. I started helping other people who'd been dismissed, discarded, told they didn't matter. Widows fighting greedy stepchildren. Elderly people battling their own families for basic respect. Women who'd been made to feel invisible." Evelyn's voice grew stronger with every word, and every single one of them reminded me that we don't have to stay small, that we can take up space, that we can fight back, that we can reclaim the parts of ourselves we lost or gave away or had stolen. She paused, letting the words settle. "I've represented 43 clients in 3 years. I've won most of those cases. I've lost some. And every single one taught me something about what it means to fight for yourself when the world tells you you're not worth fighting for." Tears started rolling down Evelyn's face, but she didn't wipe them away. "So if you're here tonight and you've been told you don't matter, that you're too old, too weak, too broken to fight, I'm here to tell you that's a lie. You matter. Your voice matters. Your life matters. And no one gets to take that from you. Not your family, not your spouse, not society. No one." Her voice broke. "You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to take up all the space you need. And if someone tries to make you smaller, you fight. You fight like hell. Because you are worth it. The applause started slowly. One person, then another, then a section, then the entire ballroom erupted. People stood, the entire room on their feet, clapping, some crying, some shouting. Evelyn stood there, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking, feeling something she hadn't felt in decades. Whole, powerful, free. After the event, dozens of people approached her, thanking her, sharing their stories, asking for advice. One woman, probably in her 50s, grabbed Evelyn's hand and squeezed tight. "My husband controls everything," she whispered. "The money, the house, my car. I've been trying to leave for 2 years, but I don't know how." Evelyn pulled out her business card. "Call me tomorrow. We'll figure it out." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "Really, I promise." Another woman approached, older, maybe 70. "My daughter-in-law is trying to have me declared incompetent. She wants my house. Come to my office. We'll talk." By the time Evelyn left the ballroom, she had 17 new potential clients, 17 people who needed help, who needed someone to believe them. Lisa looked at the stack of business cards Evelyn had collected. "We're going to need more lawyers." "I know. And a bigger office." "I know that too." Lisa grinned. "This is a good problem to have." "Yeah, it is." That night, a woman approached her as the crowd thinned out. Mid-50s, elegant, composed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Evelyn's car. "Mrs. Mercer, my name is Catherine Wells. I'm on the board of the State Bar Association." "Nice to meet you." That was an incredible speech, truly. "And I have a question for you." "What is it?" Catherine handed her a business card. "Have you ever considered returning to the bench?" Evelyn blinked. "What?" "There's an opening on the state appeals court. The governor's looking for candidates to submit for consideration, and after hearing you speak tonight, I think you'd be perfect." "I've been retired for 30 years. "So? You've also been practicing law for 3 years. You've built a reputation as someone who fights for justice, who stands up for the vulnerable, who doesn't back down when things get difficult. That's exactly what we need on the bench." Evelyn stared at her. "Are you serious?" "Completely. The appeals court needs people who understand what's at stake in these cases, people who've lived through the system's failures, people who know what it means to be overlooked." Catherine smiled. "People like you." "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet. Think about it. Talk to people. But know that if you're interested, I'll champion your nomination myself." Catherine handed her a business card and walked away, leaving Evelyn standing there holding a piece of paper that might change everything. Again. She went home that night and sat in her study, the one she'd rebuilt, the one that no longer looked like Victor's, the one that was finally hers, and stared at Catherine's business card. Could she do it? Could she go back to the bench? She'd left it decades ago, walked away because Victor asked her to, because she thought being a good wife meant giving up everything else. And now someone was offering it back. But she wasn't the same woman who'd left. She was older. She'd been through hell. She'd been torn apart and rebuilt. She'd learned things about herself, about the world, about justice that she never could have learned sitting behind a bench. Would that make her better or worse? Maria found her there an hour later, still staring at the card. "Mrs. Mercer, what's wrong?" Evelyn handed her the card. Maria read it. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God. Yeah. Are you going to do it?" "I don't know." "Why not?" "Because I'm 71 years old, Maria. I'm not the woman I was when I left the bench. I'm older, slower. I don't know if I can handle that kind of responsibility anymore. The long hours, the impossible decisions, the weight of knowing that every ruling affects real people's lives." Maria sat down across from her. "With all due respect, Mrs. Mercer, that's bullshit." Evelyn laughed despite herself. "Excuse me? You've been running a law practice for 3 years. You work 12-hour days, 14-hour days. You take on cases no one else will touch. You fight like hell for people who have nothing. You've won battles against lawyers twice as expensive with 10 times the resources. And you're telling me you can't handle being a judge?" "It's different." "How?" Evelyn didn't have an answer. Maria leaned forward. "Mrs. Mercer, you spent 30 years being someone you weren't. Someone smaller, someone quieter, someone who didn't cause trouble. Don't spend the rest of your life doing the same thing. If you want this, take it. If you don't want it, that's fine too. But don't say no because you're scared. You've earned the right to be afraid and do it anyway. What if I fail? Then you fail, but at least you'll have tried. At least you'll know. Evelyn looked at the card again, at the name printed in neat letters, at the possibility it represented. Then she picked up her phone and made the call. Catherine Wells? Ms. Wells, this is Eleanor Mercer. We spoke earlier tonight. Mrs. Mercer, hello. I've been thinking about what you said about the appeals court position. And? I'm interested, very interested. What do I need to do? Catherine's voice brightened. Leave that to me. I'll start the process tomorrow. But Mrs. Mercer, you're making the right choice. The bench needs people like you. People like me? People who've fought, people who've lost, people who've come back, people who know what justice really means. The confirmation process took 6 months and was more brutal than Evelyn expected. Background checks that dug into every decision she'd ever made as a judge, every case she'd handled in her new practice. Interviews with the Bar Association, with judicial review boards, with the governor's team. Public hearings where anyone could show up and testify for or against her nomination. Some people questioned her judgment, said she'd been out of the game too long, said her personal life, the lawsuit with Damien, the revelations about Victor, made her a liability, said she was too emotional, too involved, too willing to let her personal experiences cloud her legal reasoning. One lawyer stood up at a public hearing and said, Eleanor Mercer has an axe to grind. She's been through a nasty estate dispute. She's represented one side of these battles for 3 years. How can we trust her to be impartial? Evelyn sat in the audience and listened, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. Then her client started showing up. Rachel, the young mother she'd helped keep her son, testified on her behalf. She brought Ethan, who was 3 now, bouncing in the seat next to her. Eleanor Mercer gave me my life back, Rachel said, her voice shaking but strong. She didn't just win my case. She reminded me that I was worth fighting for, that I wasn't crazy or broken or unfit. She saw me when no one else would. That's the kind of person who should be a judge. Raymond's son testified. My father died knowing that someone had believed him, that someone had fought for him. Mrs. Mercer did that. She gave him dignity. She gave him justice. The world needs more people like her making decisions, not fewer. A woman Evelyn barely remembered, a client from her first year, testified. My son tried to steal my house. He had lawyers and money and a plan. And I had nothing except Mrs. Mercer. She stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. She won. And more than that, she made me believe I deserved to win. That's what justice looks like. By the end of the hearings, over 30 people had testified on Evelyn's behalf. Former clients, colleagues, even Marcus Killian sent a letter. While I have been on the opposite side of many cases from Eleanor Mercer, he wrote, I can say without reservation that she is one of the finest legal minds I have encountered. She is fair, thorough, and deeply committed to justice. The bench would be lucky to have her. The governor appointed her in November. Judge Eleanor Mercer, State Appeals Court. The swearing-in ceremony was held in the courthouse where she'd presided for 20 years before she walked away. The same building, different courtroom. She stood at the front, her hand on a law book, and took the oath. I do solemnly swear that I will administer justice without respect to persons, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as judge under the Constitution and laws of the United States. So help me. She paused before the last phrase, then said it anyway. It was tradition. Even if she didn't believe it, it was part of the oath. The courtroom was packed. Maria was there in the front row, crying. Lisa stood next to her, beaming. Gerald Whitmore sat in the back, nodding with pride. Rachel was there with Ethan, a dozen other clients scattered throughout the room. And Damien. He stood in the back, uncomfortable in a suit that looked new, his hands in his pockets. When Evelyn's eyes found him, he smiled, a real smile. After the ceremony, people lined up to congratulate her. Shake her hand. Welcome her back. Damien waited until everyone else had left. Congratulations, Evelyn. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't miss it. He paused, looked around the courtroom. This is where it all happened, isn't it? Where I tried to destroy you. Different courtroom, same building. Still, it It feels like coming full circle. Maybe it is. Damien looked at her directly. Dad would be proud of you. Evelyn thought about that. About Victor and his insecurities. About how he'd tried to make her small. About whether he'd actually be proud or just threatened all over again. I don't know if that's true, she said finally, but I'm proud of me, and that's enough. Damien nodded. Yeah, it is. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I wanted to give you this. What is it? An invitation to my wedding next spring. Claire and I are getting married. Evelyn took the envelope, her throat tight. Damien, I'd be honored. There's something else. He took a breath. We're having a baby. Claire's 3 months along. Tears sprang to Evelyn's eyes. That's wonderful. We want to name him James, after Claire's father. But we were thinking, if it's a girl, we'd like to name her Eleanor, after you. Evelyn couldn't speak. She just stood there, tears rolling down her face. You don't have to answer now, Damien said quickly. I just wanted you to know. You've been more of a parent to me these past few years than anyone ever was, even Dad. You held me accountable. You gave me a chance. You didn't let me off the hook, but you also didn't give up on me. That means everything. Evelyn pulled him into a hug. He stiffened for a moment, then hugged her back. I'd be honored, she whispered, more than you know. They stood there for a long moment, stepmother and stepson, not fixed, not perfect, but healing. When they pulled apart, Damien wiped his eyes. I should go. Claire's waiting. Tell her congratulations from me. I will. He started to leave, then turned back. Evelyn? Yes? Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. That's what family does. He smiled and walked away. The first case Judge Eleanor Mercer heard on the appeals court was an estate dispute. Of course it was. A daughter fighting her mother's will, claiming undue influence, claiming the mother's second husband had manipulated her, claiming she deserved the inheritance because blood mattered more than marriage. Evelyn read the briefs carefully. Both sides. Every argument, every piece of evidence. She listened to the oral arguments. The daughter's lawyer argued passionately about family obligations, about the natural order of inheritance, about protecting children from predatory spouses. The husband's lawyer argued about autonomy, about the right to make your own choices, about love that didn't come with conditions. Evelyn asked questions, probing questions, about the evidence, about the timeline, about the mother's mental state. Was the mother evaluated by a physician? She asked. Yes, Your Honor. Multiple times she was deemed competent. And the daughter's evidence of manipulation? Circumstantial at best. The mother's decisions were consistent with her values and her relationship with her husband. Evelyn took 3 weeks to write her decision. It was 28 pages long. She cited precedent, legal standards, evidentiary requirements. But she also wrote about dignity, about the right of every person to make their own choices, even at the end of their life, about the difference between influence and coercion, about love that didn't require taking. She thought about Victor, about Damien, about everything she'd been through, and she ruled in favor of the mother's autonomy, upheld the will, protected the husband. But she also wrote something that surprised everyone. This court recognizes that families are complicated, that grief makes people act in ways they might not otherwise, that the desire to preserve a parent's memory can sometimes manifest as legal action. However, the law cannot remake our relationships. It cannot heal our wounds. It can only protect the autonomy of those who can no longer speak for themselves. In this case, the mother spoke clearly, and we must listen. The decision was published. It made headlines. Appeals judge issues landmark ruling on elder autonomy. Eleanor Mercer's return to the bench, a new era of estate law. Evelyn's phone rang for days. Reporters wanting interviews, legal scholars wanting to discuss the case, other judges calling to say they agreed or disagreed or just wanted to talk through the reasoning. She answered some, ignored others, because she wasn't doing this for recognition. She wasn't doing it to be famous or important or powerful. She was doing it because it mattered, because somewhere out there, someone was being dismissed, overlooked, told they didn't matter, and she was going to make sure they were heard. 5 years after the trial, Evelyn sat in her chambers late at night, reviewing briefs for the next day's arguments. Her back ached. Her eyes were tired. Reading glasses perched on her nose. A cup of tea gone cold on her desk. But she was happy. Truly, deeply happy. Maria had retired 2 years earlier, moved to Florida to be near her grandchildren. They talked every Sunday. Maria sent pictures of the beach, of her grandkids, of her new life. She sounded content in a way Evelyn had never heard before. Lisa ran Mercer Legal Services now. Evelyn had signed it over to her completely, along with enough funding to keep it running for decades. The practice had grown. 8 lawyers now. A waiting list of clients. A reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning them anyway. Damien sent pictures from his wedding. He looked genuinely happy. Claire was beautiful, warm, everything Damien needed. They had a daughter now. Eleanor James Hale. Ellie for short. The photos showed a chubby, smiling baby with Damien's eyes and what looked like his mother's nose. Evelyn had cried when she first held her namesake. This tiny person who represented second chances and hope, and the idea that people could change. Damien was different now. Still working. Still paying Victor back, though he was ahead of schedule. He and Claire had bought a small house. Nothing fancy, but theirs. He called Evelyn once a month, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to ask for advice, sometimes just to say thank you. "I'm teaching Ellie to walk," he told her last week. "She's so stubborn, just like Dad." "Just like you too," Evelyn had said. "Yeah, I guess that's fair." Victor's estate was mostly gone now. Evelyn had donated large portions to women's shelters, legal aid organizations, elder advocacy groups, scholarship funds for law students. She kept enough to live comfortably, to never have to worry. But the rest went to people who needed it more. Because she'd learned something in those 5 years. Money didn't matter. Not really. Not. What mattered was who you were when no one was watching. What you did with the power you had. Whether you used your strength to lift people up or tear them down. Evelyn had spent 30 years being torn down. She'd spent the last 5 building others up. And she wasn't done yet. She closed the brief she was reading and looked at the photo on her desk. It was from her swearing-in ceremony. She was standing in her judge's robe, smiling, surrounded by people who loved her. Maria, Lisa, Gerald, Damien, Rachel with Ethan, Eleanor Mercer. Not Evelyn. Not Victor's widow. Not the woman who'd been dismissed as just a housewife. Eleanor. The judge, the fighter, the woman who'd reclaimed her life. She turned off the light and locked her chambers. Tomorrow, there'd be more cases, more fights, more people who needed someone to stand up for them. And she'd be ready, because she'd learned the hardest lesson of all. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't love someone into wholeness by making yourself broken. You can't save anyone by losing yourself. Real strength isn't about sacrifice. It's about boundaries, about knowing your worth, about refusing to be small just because someone else needs you to be. Victor had tried to make her small. Damien had tried to destroy her. The world had tried to dismiss her. They'd all failed. Because Eleanor Mercer was done being anything other than exactly who she was meant to be. Powerful, brilliant, unbreakable. And finally, after 71 years, completely and utterly free. She walked out of the courthouse into the cool evening air. The city lights sparkled around her. Somewhere in those buildings, someone was hurting. Someone was being dismissed. Someone needed help. And tomorrow, she'd be there. But tonight, she went home to her house that was finally just hers. To her study that held her books and her memories and her future. To her life that she'd built from the ashes of everything she'd lost. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat on the back porch, watched the stars come out. And she smiled. Because this was it. This was freedom. This was what it meant to be whole. Not perfect, not unmarked, not untouched by pain, but strong. Standing, still here, still fighting, still winning,